to set your lineups for week 5, and we're focusing on the wide receivers to start or sit with SI fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano. Fabs, let's start with the receivers you like for this week.
DK Metcalf, and at some point here very soon, he's going to be too obvious to even talk about. He's been great so far this season. Didn't score a touchdown last week, but still gave you nearly 15 fantasy points against the Dolphins. This week, he's got the Vikings. Their defense has been awful against wide receivers lined out wide, allowing an average of nearly 140 yards and the 4th most fantasy points. Metcalf runs an average of about 30 of his routes per game out wide. So this is a potential smash spot for DK Metcalf. And then Robbie Anderson, yet another player who leaves Adam Gase's clutches and thrives someplace else, right? I mean, he has been tremendous. Through 4 weeks, he's tied for 8th in targets among wide receivers. He's 6th in receiving yards. He's 11th in fantasy points per game. And this week, he's got Atlanta. They have been awful on the defensive side of the football. They've allowed an average of 115 yards and over 21 fantasy points per game to receivers who line out wide, which is where Anderson is running about 21 routes per game. So DJ Moore, who has been struggling, get him into your lineup. And Robbie Anderson, who's been pretty darn good, keep him in your lineup.
Yeah, Anderson is definitely finding his groove with his new team. But let's talk about the guys that you don't think should be in lineups. Who are the receivers to sit this week, Fabs?
Let's start off with AJ Green. And, Kaitlin, at some point, he may be droppable because despite the fact that he's tied for 14th in targets among wide receivers, he's just not producing. In fact, 91 receivers have more points. 91! Like, that's a lot, right? And he's also taken a backseat in the passing game to Tyler Boyd. And now rookie T. Higgins, who has 16 targets over the last 2 games and has also scored 2 touchdowns. So couple that with a matchup against the Ravens, and A.J. Green should be on your bench. And then T.Y. Hilton. I mean, he's been on a milk carton all season long. Where has he been? He's tied for 85th among wide receivers in fantasy points right now. 35 wide receivers have more targets. The Colts are running the ball about 50% of the time, and Phillip Rivers ranks 27th among quarterbacks in targeting wide receivers. Hilton could also be matched up against Denzel Ward this week in Cleveland, so he needs to be on your bench, and T.Y. has been one of the biggest disappointments in fantasy football at the wide receiver position.
I want to go back to A.J. Green because he has been one of the most targeted players in the NFL through 4 weeks, but he has little to show for it. And now you're saying he may even be droppable. So not a chance worth taking. Good insight, Fabs. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. For Sports Illustrated's award-winning weekly player rankings, get your membership to SI Fantasy Plus for just $14.99 a month.